You're probably wondering how I got into this situation, and boy do I have quite a story to tell you guys. Alright, what's going on guys, and welcome back to the channel. Now in today's video we're going to be doing part 1 of rebuilding my wrecked 2006 Subaru Legacy GT Spec B. Now I got this car at an auction for about 1,100 bucks. What a mess. And it was in a front end collision and the engine is completely ruined. So what I'll be doing today is just kind of going through the first steps that I needed to take when rebuilding this car. And the first task was going to be just pulling the engine out. I haven't pulled the radiator out just yet, but as you can see, it's currently draining out. See all that green right there and a little bit of that dripping out. Pulled the drain plug. That's going to be coming out pretty shortly. Unfortunately, I think we do need to replace the radiator. This was not my doing. This was just me literally taking this piece off, and I noticed that the plastic end on this side is not looking so good. This is supposed to be a part of the radiator, and now it's just a giant hole in the top. So you probably could patch this if you really wanted to, but I wouldn't advise doing something like that because this is going to be pressurized coolant running through here, so it's probably going to give you issues down the road. So it's probably best to just replace the unit while it's out. This metal right here is kind of bent in. This should actually be much more straight, but it's not. So I think I need to spend some time and pull this back out. Along with this needs to be tweaked and manipulated a little bit. This is pretty easy though. This is pretty flexible steel, so this should be able to come out with no real issue. I'm not really too worried about the bodywork right now. It's more about just pulling the engine out. So we'll definitely come back to this later. And here's a look at the sad looking intake. That's not a biggie. This was a pain to take out. Luckily you weren't there for that. But the words of wisdom that I did want to pass down to anybody that is taking on removing an engine, I think it's pretty beneficial to talk about this, especially if this is something for somebody out there that wants to do this with their car, either be an engine swap or rebuilding your engine. Is the biggest thing you want to do is you want to stay organized. Now when you stay organized and you keep going through stuff, you're gonna learn very quickly that all these little bolts and stuff, when you're looking for them days later, are just magically gonna disappear if you don't stay organized. So what I typically do is I just go to the store and I get these really cheap basic sandwich baggies and then some painter's tape and a Sharpie. And you always want to have this stuff on hand because when you're going through it, and for example, I took off all these little bits from the radiator, I would put these in the bag and I would label it radiator, so I would know exactly where all the radiator bolts and stuff are later down the road when I'm putting the car back together. Because it's super easy in the heat of the moment to just be so focused on taking all this stuff off that you just completely forget the whole basis that you have to put this back together. And it's going to be a lot of stuff that is going to be very intricate and complex that you need to put back exactly as it was. And you can't always rely on your memory, and maybe it's because I'm getting a little bit older now. I don't remember as good as I did maybe 10 years ago, that I need to be able to just remember everything that I did step by step. So what we did next was we used a tire in between my dad's truck and the Subaru to push into the corner of the shop. The reason that we have to do that is because there's a slight incline, but what the engine will start to look like is it will look almost like the engine's floating. So this is when you remove everything that's going to be in the way when pulling it out. And this is just the basic next steps for any Subarus. You just need to make sure that everything is disassembled from the top and the bottom. Just as a quick disclaimer, be prepared for things to not go as smooth as you think they do, especially just from the past with doing these turbo Subaru engines, is things typically get stuck. There's always going to be that one bolt that could put you back a couple hours or a couple minutes. So just be prepared for that. It happens in almost any car. It doesn't have to be just like a Subaru, but you know, it's just a part of the process. But if you could do the best you can to prepare for pulling the engine out, it's going to make things a lot smoother. It's been a really long time since I've done this. All right, world, so we're back. It's the next day, and I'm back at the car. And we made a lot of progress. I was pretty exhausted from just making sure that everything was taken off in preparation for pulling the engine. The good news is it actually went really smoothly. And there's a lot more good news is the undercarriage of the car, which I haven't really had a chance to look at. When I was looking underneath the car, it looks really good. Was looking for just like, your typical rust. A lot of people like to drive these Subarus in the winter, so it's definitely something that you want to look for, because when you drive in the wintertime on these salty roads, most of the time you'll see that the underside of the car will be nice and rusty. And I know this is not the best view. Let me see if I can get you guys a better view here of what the underneath looks like. But as you can see, even on the exhaust manifold, which is a really common area for rust to start developing, is we don't really see any of that. Don't mind the broken timing belt. It's pretty dark under here. But that was something that I did want to mention when putting this back together. In terms of other Subaru engines that I've taken out, this one was probably the smoothest that's been a turbo model, just due to the fact that the bolts that connect the downpipe and the turbo weren't stuck. I think it's been almost every single time that I've done one of these engines that these studs that get really, really stuck, just due to the fact that they expand and contract just from the high temperatures of the heat. And I just made a mess. And as you can see, it's still a project. It's gonna be a project for a while. This corner is not looking so hot. But in terms of the engine being pulled, this is all the nuts and bolts and stuff. Everything else is ready to go. I mean, all we really need to do is just bring in the hoist. I moved the AC compressor and the lines to the side. I definitely don't want to disconnect that, or else all the Freon gas is going to escape. And that is not good for anybody that's in contact with that or the environment. Also have the power steering moved over to the side to keep the lines. You can disconnect this if you want to, but what happens is, since fluid runs through here, you disconnect this and you're just gonna have a huge leaky mess for days. And I guess you could put this in like some sort of tub, but you should be okay just putting it off to the side. The clutch is disconnected. And what I found interesting is I think this is actually a push style clutch versus a pull style clutch. So basically what that means is the clutch engagement on this, instead of the fork going in the direction of pulling out the clutch itself, it's actually going to be pushing it in, which means that it's a little bit easier to take out for us, because on the pull style clutches it takes a little bit more work. There's like a little bolt that goes through that holds the fork in place that you have to remove, and we don't have to do any of that, which is nice. I removed all the bolts that hold up the engine and the transmission. So there's a bunch of bolts, including the starter. I don't know if you guys can see down there. This is the starter that's removed. The ones on the bottom are a little tricky, but as long as you have like a swivel head socket, it goes pretty smooth. And the inside of the car, as well as the outside, is absolutely filthy, to be expected. It was sitting for a long time, and I didn't really get a chance to work on this since COVID-19 hit. And holy cow, the backseat is just literally full of stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's coming along. It's starting to not look like a car. It's really in pieces at this point, but that's okay. I mean, that's the whole point that we tackled this project, right? So let me go get the hoist, and I'll do my best to film some of it, but I'm not going to go super in depth or crazy with it, because this is definitely not my first rodeo. So I definitely want to just be efficient with taking this out, but we can definitely talk more once we have it on an engine stand. And speaking of that, I already got the engine stand already. Surprisingly enough, I'm not a big advocate of Harbor Freight tools. I've had the experience of using stuff from there. It's really cost effective. I mean, if you're on a total budget, I got nothing against people going to Harbor Freight to get stuff. But in terms of some of their tools, it's a little bit questionable. But I will say this engine stand, for what it is in just terms of basic usage of just being an engine stand, is fantastic. I really recommend this if you're looking just for like a budget engine stand. Easy to take apart, easy to put back together, and it doesn't really get in the way. But yeah, I think you guys are probably tired of me blabbering on about this stupid car, so let's get to work. Alright guys, and that concludes part 1 of rebuilding my Subaru Legacy. So stay tuned for the next episode where I'll show when we actually take the engine out of the car, and then we can go over what actually happened to the engine. But in the meantime, if you're new, I would consider subscribing if you're looking for more Subaru or car related content. I got a lot more videos coming up on the way. I also did want to say that I have started a Twitch channel as well. So I stream on Twitch weekly with my friends. If you're into Warzone or Among Us or any other games of that sort, it's a really fun place just to interact with you guys and hang out. So there's another opportunity there. And with that being said, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.